Kabir, thank you so much for
Thank
having
you.
us on your farmhouse.
Thank you.
As it were, the federal government has just declared a state of emergency in
Yeah.
agriculture and all that has to do with food security. What comes to mind?
I think it's about time. I think it's a timely intervention. The prices of food has been really, really high, but there's been a lot of interest in agriculture and agribusiness, and it needs to translate down, to the food systems, to the market itself. So I think it's a timely intervention.
On a general view, prior to now, what do you think we have not been doing right?
There's a lot of things we've not been doing right. I usually like to start with maybe some of the things we have actually gotten right before, which has been one. As a country, we've actively tried to always engage in agriculture. We've always worried about our food sustainability, where our food comes from, and being engaged with agriculture. 70% of the country engages in agriculture. So that it's something positive we've been doing. I think what we have not really done right, or we are still in the learning curve, is how to make that transition from pure agriculture to agribusiness value chains, but still keep it inclusive. We need technology that will actually work, that addresses a problem, rather than finding a solution, then look for a problem to fit into that solution. We need to see what our challenges are. We've had historically low yields, right? Our agricultural systems are low yielding, are multi-cropping systems. So how can we not move away into monoculture, keep that multi-cropping system, but also increase the yield? And how can we also make sure that there is a better stream of income going down to the bottom of the value chains? We have a big knowledge and extension gap in the country. How can that translate to the smallholder farmers? I think those are areas where...
Before we move on, you came up with an issue that I find interesting. You talked about the monoculture or the monocropping and then multi-cropping.
Yeah.
Back in those days, when we were being taught agriculture in school, multi-cropping seemed to be the way out. But you seem to be saying something to the contrary now.
No, multi-cropping is good. It's what we should be doing. But we had a phase where monoculture was the order of the day. We tried to approach this value chain approach where you have farms, thousands of hectares planting just one crop. As we are going forward with the changing climate, with the rising input costs, and also with the impact, the environmental impact of agriculture, we've come to realize that multi-cropping systems are actually good. Those are what were being practiced before in the 70s and the 80s, maybe not as much in the 80s, but in the 70s and going backward historically among our farmers, we had people doing multi-crops. But from the green revolution of the 70s, when we started looking at productivity, people moved into single crop farming. Right now, we are trying to bring back that biodiversity into the farm, how to make people do multi-cropping approach, but still be productive enough to fit into a value chain.
Looking around your farm, I see a lot of smart agriculture taking place. Share your thoughts with us.
So for us on the farm here, we focus a lot on vegetable production and horticulture because we believe that for a horticultural farmer, you need a lot of diversity. Horticulturers are farmers that work with vegetables, fruits, and also herbs. So a lot of that goes into horticulture. But let's say fruits and vegetables, right? You need a lot of diversity when we are talking of vegetable crops in the diet. You can't be a farmer that grows, say, just tomato, for instance, all year long. You will maybe grow some corn, some tomatoes, some peppers. You will have a different mix of crops, and that's what we try to do here. Have a diversity of crops, but also be very precise in our farming methods. So we are very specific in how we apply fertilizers, very small quantities. We are very specific in our water use, because water is a big aspect of agriculture. A big volume of the global table water level is being used by agriculture. So how can you use it more effectively? We've tried to move into irrigation systems that are not very complex, but at least minimizes use. So we use about 25% of the water that an average farmer uses to grow tomato in Kano. We use a lot less than that here.
I would want to find out from you, once the rainy season comes in, the prices of tomatoes goes way above the ceiling.
Yeah.
Why haven't we been able to mitigate that problem?
So this is a big question that we keep getting asked, and I worked on some few projects over the past 2-3 years on that outside of my role on the farm. I did a lot of work on a Seeds for Change program, which we did with the Dutch private sector and seed growers. One of the key things that was identified was that the varieties we used could not withstand the raining season diseases. There is more diseases for your crops during the raining season, so you have more losses, and that's not just for tomatoes, for cabbages, for watermelon. So it's a factor of what varieties that you're using. We've been trying to bring in new varieties and also a few methods. If you look through most of the farms, we advise on trellising, growing upwards vertically, rather than allowing your crops sprawl on the ground. When it's on the ground, it's a good area for fungi to grow because it's dark, it's moist, and but when you put it up, it's aerated, there's ventilation, and it gets a lot more sunlight.
I see a lot of that around the
So
farm.
yes, just being able to pick a good variety and using the right agronomic practices like trellising or mulching your soil already helps you to produce in a raining season where most people assume that varieties of this product can't grow. Now it goes back to the prices. Why do the prices rise? It's because there's a disruption in production. But if we can have the same production in the dry season and the wet season, it will mean the prices will stabilize because you're not now fighting with the forces of demand and supply.
You know, the place of education.
Yeah.
Because 70% of our farmers are quite not in the literate bracket.
Yeah.
Share your thoughts with us. How productive has advances in technology been able to percolate down to this fulcrum that is largely responsible for our food security?
Yes, so I think one of the key aspects of being literate is that you can pass information clearly about what you've done. So what that means is we have farmers that have a wealth of knowledge, indigenous knowledge, but it's harder for them to transfer it to the younger people or new practitioners in agri. When you have extension officers or people that have been literate or educated, quote unquote, we say, they're able to pass that knowledge on. They're able to document better for other people to replicate what they do
extension workers? Why
on
do
the
we
farm.
call them extension workers?
So extension workers typically are agricultural professionals that work with farmers to optimize their yields, to optimize their performances. Typically, they used to be employed by the government agencies, but as we've been moving down into the 21st century, extension work has become more private and become privatized, especially like a country with like Nigeria that has 200 million people and a very diverse ecological landscape. It's hard for a government to reach every nook and cranny, but the private businesses that run those value chains now want extension officers or private extension or pay for the extension so that these farmers can produce to the quality and the consistency that they need in their value chain.
One thing we need to talk about is how can we insulate the farmer from the agri-business aspect of this whole thing? Because quite often, I normally would ask this question every time. The farmer usually, you know, maybe for the want of a better word, ends up somewhat shortchanged.
Oh, yes.
It's the man
yes.
out there who is the middleman that makes all the money.
Yeah. So one of the things we've been, a notion and a thought process we've been pushing is the inclusive agribusiness model. So when you have an inclusive agribusiness, you are not just looking at what happens at the top of the chain, because you're only as strong as the weakest part of your chain. Right. So if the farmers that are producing, most of the food we still eat in the world is done by smallholder farmers, right? If they are not able to keep producing, if they don't see any reason, any reward for what they are doing, they will depreciate, they will drop in their output, and that will add into spiraling costs because there's less commodity for us to consume. So it's very important to have models that are inclusive of the smallholder farmers, and we need to start thinking of quality of life for the smallholder farmers, how much they make, especially with rising costs now.
If we are to try to stabilize food prices, what in your opinion is the best method to go through?
For me, it's a very tough question. To stabilize food prices, one of the key things is the high cost of inputs. So we need to be able to make our inputs locally. How do we bring other companies and other aspects of production, the seeds? You know, we're talking of new genetics of seeds. How are we, Nigerian seed breeders, faring? How much of those inputs are we sourcing and getting locally? Once the cost of your input goes down, then you will be able to make more margins in your output. That's number one. Number two, we need to increase our acreage, right? We have farmers that are farming on very small acreage. So you need to be able to do at a big scale. We can do mechanical, but it has to be tailored to what is on ground. It's a risk when we jump straight to the mechanization without looking at it being produced here. But first, the easy things, the fertilizers, the seeds that we are using, the way we transfer the knowledge within the farmers. Agriculture can't happen without water. How do we efficiently manage water?
Should water really be a problem in a place like Nigeria, mostly a country occasioned with floods from time to time? Can't
Yes,
we dam some of this water and then use it later?
Yes, so it's one aspect to be able to dam the water. It's another aspect, the quality of the water you use.
Quality of water?
Yes, so you have waters that might be saline, or you have waters that are polluted maybe with industrial waste.
Oh.
Then the third and final aspect is the energy to move the water, right? So we have states like Niger State that has a lot of water body, but Kano, traditionally and historically in Nigeria, has the best irrigation networks. Right. It's not about the volume of water you have, it's how you make it to be used for agricultural purposes.
Can the same be replicated in other places?
Yes, I think it can, and that goes a bit above my pay grade. We'll look towards the government, towards the big investors, and let's hope that we can do a lot more into irrigation projects that will help agricultural productivity. But more importantly, the energy that moves the water. As we're having higher energy costs, we need to think about how can you do solar-driven irrigation. That's something that it's going to be crucial to moving forward with farms.
Kabir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.